Sometimes the most devastating truths come from the most unexpected sources. What began as a simple trip to buy groceries for my son's visit would unravel a web of lies that had been strangling our family for years. The elderly cashier's whispered words would change everything, forcing me to make a decision that would either save my son or destroy our relationship forever. Standing there with my receipt trembling in arthritic hands, I couldn't process what I just heard. The man's weathered face held genuine concern as he spoke those impossible words about my daughter-in-law's family. Words that contradicted everything I thought I knew about their desperate financial situation. My immediate instinct was denial, but something in his eyes told me this wasn't the rambling of a confused old man. This was truth, raw and painful. My name is Adeline Thorne, and at 67, I thought I'd seen enough of life to recognize deception when it stared me in the face. Apparently I was wrong. Living alone on a pension that barely stretches to cover my monthly medications, I've always been careful with money. Every dollar gets counted twice before it's spent. Every purchase weighed against necessity. But when it comes to family, especially my only son Owen, I've never hesitated to share what little I have. Owen married Sienna 3 years ago, and from our first meeting something felt off. Not anything I could put my finger on, just a mother's intuition that whispered warnings I chose to ignore. She seemed pleasant enough, if somewhat reserved, and I convinced myself her coolness toward me was just shyness. Her father Leonard always greeted me warmly, sharing stories about their financial struggles with such detail that I never questioned their authenticity. The cashier's words echoed in my mind as I walked toward the store's back exit, my heart hammering against my ribs. He told me things that couldn't possibly be true. Sienna's family shopping regularly for luxury groceries, Leonard bragging about the money Owen sent them monthly, purchases that exceeded my yearly food budget. It was impossible, wasn't it? But doubt had planted itself firmly in my consciousness, growing stronger with each step. Instead of returning to Owen's car, I found myself ducking behind the dumpsters near the parking lot, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself. If what I'd heard was true, I would see evidence with my own eyes. If not, I could dismiss the whole thing as neighborhood gossip and return to trusting the people my son loved. The smell of garbage was unpleasant, but I barely noticed it as I positioned myself where I could observe the store's main entrance. Owen sat waiting in his car, probably wondering what was taking me so long. I told him I was just buying a simple cake for our visit to Sienna's family, nothing that should require more than a few minutes. That morning, I'd carefully counted out $43 from my emergency jar, money I'd been saving by skipping small pleasures like my weekly coffee at the corner cafe. $20 would buy a decent cake, leaving just enough for my prescription refill later in the week. I dressed in my best outfit, the navy dress I reserved for special occasions, and styled my graying hair as neatly as possible. At my age, looking presentable requires more effort than it once did. Less than 5 minutes had passed when I witnessed something that shattered my understanding of everything I'd believed about my daughter-in-law's family. Leonard emerged from the store carrying bags that clearly didn't contain ordinary groceries. These were the distinctive black and gold carriers from Meridian Market, the upscale grocery store I'd only ever admired from the outside. The kind of place where a single meal's ingredients could cost what I spend on food for an entire week. My breath caught as Leonard approached a vehicle I'd never seen before. Gone was the battered old sedan he'd always complained about, the one that supposedly needed constant repairs they couldn't afford. In its place sat a gleaming silver sedan, its paint so pristine it reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror. The car looked fresh off the dealer's lot, complete with temporary plates and that unmistakable new car gleam. Leonard loaded his expensive purchases into the trunk with casual ease, then pulled out his phone for what appeared to be a relaxed conversation. His posture radiated contentment, not the stressed demeanor of a man struggling to pay basic bills. Everything about his appearance, from his well-tailored clothing to his confident stride, contradicted the narrative of financial desperation his family had been painting for months. A chill ran through me as fragments of recent conversations suddenly took on new meaning. Sienna's regular calls to Owen, always with urgent requests for help. Rent money, medical bills, grocery funds. each crisis accompanied by tearful explanations and grateful promises to repay the money when their situation improved. Money that never was repaid because new emergencies always arose first. As I crouched behind those dumpsters, watching Leonard's relaxed phone conversation, the full scope of what might be happening began to crystallize. Had my generous, trusting son been systematically exploited by the very people he was trying to help? The thought made me physically ill, but I couldn't look away from the evidence unfolding before me. Leonard finished his call and began walking back toward the store, his movements unhurried and confident. For a moment, his gaze swept the parking lot as if checking to see if anyone had noticed him. That cautious glance felt damning, the behavior of someone who had something to hide. I pressed further back into my hiding spot, grateful for the shadows that concealed me. While I waited to see what would happen next, my mind wandered to the events that had brought me to this moment. That morning, I'd awakened excited about visiting Sienna's family. It had been months since my last visit, and I wanted to make a good impression. After counting my carefully hoarded savings, I'd selected the least wrinkled bills and headed to the neighborhood bakery. The cake I'd chosen was simple but elegant, vanilla with modest decoration. At $18, it cost $2 less than my budget allowed, leaving room for a small greeting card. Such tiny victories matter when every penny counts. I'd felt proud of my careful planning, pleased to contribute something special to our family gathering. The checkout line at the grocery store had been routine until the cashier noticed the name on my credit card. When the card was declined as I'd expected, I'd pulled out my cash. That's when the man looked at me more closely, whispered my name, and asked if I was Owen's mother. His expression had changed completely when I confirmed it, shifting from polite customer service to genuine concern. What he told me next would haunt me for months. He'd been observing my daughter-in-law's family for weeks, watching them spend hundreds of dollars on imported delicacies and premium products, while simultaneously knowing they were requesting financial help from my son. He'd seen Leonard purchase single bottles of wine that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. He'd watched Sienna buy expensive cosmetics and designer clothing, always paying in cash with casual indifference to the prices. The cashier explained that his own mother had fallen victim to similar family manipulation years earlier, losing her life savings before anyone had the courage to speak up. That's why he'd decided to warn me, he said. He couldn't stand watching another elderly woman count coins for a simple cake, while her family's generosity was being exploited by people who lived in luxury. Those words had driven me from the store in a state of shock, unable to fully process their implications. For years, I'd watched my son work extra shifts to send money to people I believed were desperately poor. I'd contributed my own small savings on multiple occasions, feeling guilty when I couldn't give more. The idea that this sacrifice might have been based on lies was almost too painful to consider. That's why I found myself hiding behind trash cans, spying on people I'd trusted for years. I needed concrete evidence before I could act on such serious accusations. The consequences of being wrong would be devastating for my relationship with Owen, but the consequences of being right and staying silent might be even worse. From my concealed position, I had a clear view of everything happening in the parking lot. The smell of garbage was nauseating, but it seemed a small price to pay for the truth. When Leonard emerged with those luxury shopping bags, my heart clenched with the painful realization that the cashier had been right. The bags bore the distinctive logo of Meridian Market, their gold lettering catching the sunlight. I knew that store's reputation for catering to wealthy customers who didn't flinch at premium prices. A single shopping trip there could easily exceed my monthly food budget, yet Leonard carried multiple bags as if such extravagance were routine. His car told an even more disturbing story. The gleaming sedan looked expensive even to my untrained eye, with the pristine condition that only comes with recent purchase. I mentally calculated what such a vehicle might cost, arriving at figures that represented more money than I'd seen in my entire life. How could someone who owned such a car claim to need constant financial assistance for basic living expenses? Leonard's phone conversation appeared casual and cheerful, nothing like the stressed communications of someone facing genuine financial crisis. His body language radiated satisfaction and comfort, the posture of someone whose biggest worries were pleasant ones. Everything about his demeanor contradicted the narrative of desperate poverty his family had been presenting. As I watched, small details I previously dismissed began forming a disturbing pattern. Sienna's casual mentions of expensive restaurants where she'd supposedly been treated by generous friends. Her comments about incredible sales that explained her constantly updated wardrobe. Social media posts that hinted at a lifestyle far more comfortable than their requests for help would suggest. Two elderly women pushing shopping carts past my hiding spot began discussing someone who sounded remarkably like my daughter-in-law. Their conversation made me lean forward, straining to catch every word despite the risk of being discovered. "Did you see Sienna's new outfit at the community center yesterday?" one woman asked her companion. "That dress had to cost at least $200. I saw the identical one at Bella's boutique last week." Her friend nodded knowingly. "That's nothing compared to what my granddaughter told me. She works at that French cosmetics store in the mall, and apparently Sienna is one of their best customers. Spends money like it grows on trees, according to my granddaughter." My pulse quickened as I realized they were discussing the same woman who had called Owen just last week, sobbing about not having money for her father's medication. The same person who regularly requested help with rent, utilities, and groceries. "What strikes me as odd," the first woman continued, "is how she's always buying expensive things but tells everyone in the neighborhood they're going through terrible financial hardship. My friend Margaret works at the bank and says the deposits they receive don't match their story of poverty at all." "I suppose it could all be gossip," her companion replied, though her tone suggested skepticism. "But my daughter lives on their street, and she's told me about the delivery trucks that arrive there weekly. Groceries from the most expensive stores in the city, purchases that would take the rest of us months to afford." As the women walked away, their conversation faded but its impact remained. They spoke of parties Sienna's family had hosted, elaborate affairs with professional catering and expensive decorations. Every detail they mentioned felt like a physical blow, each revelation making me feel more foolish for having believed the stories of desperate need. I remembered the night Sienna had called me directly, her voice breaking with tears as she described choosing between her father's medicine and food for the family. She'd sounded so genuinely distressed that I couldn't sleep, tortured by images of their suffering. The next morning, I'd withdrawn $150 from my emergency savings, money I'd been hoarding for my own potential medical needs. Now, learning about their luxurious lifestyle from neighborhood observers, I felt like the most gullible woman alive. How had I missed signs that were apparently obvious to everyone else? How had my son and I become such easy marks for professional manipulators? Leonard returned from the store with another bag, smaller this time but still from the same upscale establishment. He stopped to chat with a man washing a car nearby, their interaction appearing friendly and relaxed. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language suggested Leonard was respected in the neighborhood, possibly due to his apparent financial success. After a few minutes, Leonard handed the other man what looked like money, several bills passed over with casual generosity. If his family truly faced the financial difficulties they claimed, how could he afford such spontaneous charity? The contradiction was glaring and damning. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen, asking about my delay at the store. I'd completely forgotten about him waiting in the car, probably growing concerned about my extended absence. I quickly replied that I'd been caught in a long checkout line, a lie that felt necessary until I could process everything I'd witnessed. As I typed my response, Leonard said goodbye to his new acquaintance and returned to his car. The engine started with a smooth, powerful sound that confirmed the vehicle's quality and recent manufacture. I watched him leave the parking lot with the calm confidence of someone who had no pressing concerns about money or anything else. The time had come to leave my hiding spot and return to Owen's car. I needed to act normal, at least temporarily, while I figured out how to handle the disturbing information I'd gathered. My mind was already racing, recalling dozens of small inconsistencies I'd overlooked during months of trusting the wrong people. When I reached Owen's car, he immediately noticed my distress. "Mom, are you feeling all right?" he asked as I settled into the passenger seat. You look pale. Did something happen in the store? Just a longer wait than expected, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. You know how grocery stores can be on weekends. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard I worried he might hear it. The evidence I'd gathered felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, but I couldn't share it yet. I needed more certainty before destroying my son's faith in the people he loved. As we drove toward Sienna's family's house, I attempted casual conversation while my mind continued processing what I'd witnessed. Every traffic light brought us closer to a confrontation I now viewed through completely different eyes. How has Leonard's work situation been lately? I asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Last time I spoke with Sienna, she mentioned things were quite difficult for him. Owen sighed heavily. Yeah, Mom. Sienna says her dad had to cut back his hours because his company is having financial problems. That's why we've been helping them more these past few months. This information directly contradicted Leonard's relaxed demeanor and expensive purchases I'd just witnessed. A man truly worried about reduced income wouldn't be shopping at luxury stores or handing cash to strangers in parking lots. How do you feel about providing that help, son? I pressed gently, watching his expression in the rearview mirror. I know you've been working a lot of overtime recently. They're family now, Mom, Owen replied with a mixture of tiredness and resignation. When you marry someone, you marry into their family too. If they need help, it's my responsibility as a son-in-law to provide it. His words broke my heart. My kind, hard-working son was exhausting himself for people who, based on what I'd discovered, were exploiting his generosity without shame. How much longer could this continue before it seriously damaged his own financial future? We arrived in Sienna's neighborhood, a pleasant residential area with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns. It wasn't the most exclusive part of town, but it certainly wasn't where people facing genuine financial crisis would typically live. As Owen searched for parking, I examined Sienna's family's house more closely. The two-story building featured a beautifully landscaped front yard and a recently painted facade. The windows displayed new curtains, and the front door appeared to have been renovated not long ago. The house looks very well maintained, I commented, fishing for information. Didn't you mention they were having trouble affording some necessary repairs? Leonard managed to pick up some weekend work to handle the most urgent repairs, Owen explained as he parked. He's been putting in extra hours to keep the house in good condition. Another story that didn't align with reality. If Leonard were truly working extra shifts just to survive, when would he have time for luxury shopping during business hours? More importantly, how would he have money for expensive purchases if every dollar supposedly went toward house maintenance? Before we could ring the doorbell, Sienna appeared with a radiant smile that immediately caught my attention. Her transformation from our last meeting just 1 month earlier was startling. She wore a dress that was obviously expensive, made from high-quality fabric with a perfect fit that suggested professional tailoring. Her shoes gleamed with the distinctive shine of recent purchase, and her handbag coordinated perfectly with her outfit. But what struck me most was her hair and makeup. She sported a professional cut with highlights that shimmered in the sunlight, the kind of styling that costs more than my monthly grocery budget. Her makeup was flawless, achieved with premium products and considerable time for application. Adeline, what a wonderful surprise to see you, Sienna exclaimed, embracing me warmly. Her perfume was expensive, a fragrance I recognized from department store advertisements and price tags that made me gasp. Hello, Sienna, I managed, trying to hide my shock. That's a beautiful dress you're wearing. This old thing, she laughed with what seemed like forced casualness. I found it at a clearance sale months ago. You know how it is when you find good deals, you have to take advantage. The explanation sounded exactly like what the women at the grocery store had described. Always a convenient story to justify expensive items. Incredible sales, generous friends, second-hand finds that looked brand new. How many extraordinary coincidences could one family experience? Inside the house, I immediately noticed changes from my last visit. The living room had been completely redecorated with furniture I didn't recognize. A new leather sofa dominated the space, accompanied by a glass coffee table that gleamed under the lights. Decorative objects that were clearly not inexpensive were strategically placed around the room. The wall now featured a massive flat-screen television that hadn't been there before, one of the newer models that cost several $1,000s. How could a family in financial crisis justify purchasing such a luxury item? "Dad, look who came to visit us," Sienna called toward the kitchen. Leonard appeared, wiping his hands on a towel, his expression shifting slightly when he saw me. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, as if he'd seen something unexpected. But he quickly recovered his usual friendly demeanor. "Adeline, so good to see you," he said, approaching to greet me. "We hope you brought your appetite because Sienna has prepared a feast." It was the same Leonard I'd observed at the grocery store an hour earlier, but now he acted as if he'd been home all day. His clothes were identical, though he'd added an apron to suggest he'd been cooking. "I brought a cake to contribute to the meal," I said, offering him the box. "I hope everyone will enjoy it." "How thoughtful of you, Adeline," Sienna gushed. "But it really wasn't necessary. You know you're always welcome here without bringing anything." As she spoke, I could see over her shoulder into the kitchen, where counters were covered with ingredients that suggested elaborate culinary preparation. I could identify expensive cuts of meat, exotic vegetables, and imported seasonings. The quantity and quality of food they were preparing could easily feed a large family for days, and the cost of ingredients was obviously far beyond what I could afford for my own meals. "Did you prepare all this yourselves?" I asked, genuinely amazed by the abundance. "We wanted to do something special for your visit," Leonard replied proudly. "You don't have Owen's mother over every day. Besides, we got some ingredients on sale, so we decided to take advantage of the opportunity." The miraculous sales explanation again. I was beginning to suspect this family either had supernatural luck finding bargains, or these stories were simply cover for expenses they couldn't honestly explain. Throughout our visit, Owen seemed completely oblivious to my observations. He chatted animatedly with Sienna about work and future plans, his relaxed attitude confirming he genuinely believed the version of reality they presented. But I could no longer ignore the mounting evidence before my eyes. During lunch, I tried maintaining normal conversation while discreetly cataloging details that might confirm or disprove my suspicions. The table was set with dinnerware I didn't remember seeing before, plates and glasses that appeared to be of premium quality. The food they served was abundant and varied, featuring multiple main courses and elaborate side dishes that required expensive ingredients. Leonard poured wine into crystal glasses, a bottle I recognized from having seen its price at various stores, well over $60. Such wine was a luxury I couldn't imagine affording under any circumstances. "This wine is exceptional," I commented, hoping to gather information. "Is it a special brand?" "This one," Leonard replied with obvious pride. "A friend who works in wine importing got it for me at a special price. Normally, we couldn't afford wines like this, but when these opportunities arise, you have to take advantage." There was always a perfect explanation, always a generous friend or incredible deal that justified every luxury. I was starting to wonder how many generous friends one family could have, and how frequently such extraordinary opportunities could realistically occur. While we ate, Sienna casually mentioned plans for next month's family celebration. As she described it, the event would require substantial investment in decorations, food, and entertainment. "That sounds expensive," I said before I could stop myself. "Expensive?" Sienna laughed. "We've been saving for this celebration for months. Besides, Leonard picked up an additional job that will help cover the costs." I immediately thought about what I'd witnessed at the grocery store just hours earlier. Leonard spending money carelessly, purchasing luxury items, driving an expensive new car. What was the truth about his employment situation? "What kind of additional work did you find, Leonard?" I asked directly. For a moment, I saw discomfort cross his face, as if my question had caught him unprepared. But he quickly regained his composure. "Weekend consulting," he replied vaguely. "Nothing too exciting, but it helps supplement our family income." His answer was so general it could mean anything or nothing. A man genuinely doing weekend consulting would probably discuss his work with more specificity, especially when asked by his son-in-law's mother. During our conversation, Sienna's phone constantly buzzed with messages. Each time she checked the screen, she smiled in a way that seemed significant. When she thought no one was watching, she replied to a message, typing quickly with obvious satisfaction. "Everything okay with your phone?" I asked with apparent curiosity. "Just friends organizing a gathering for next week," she replied quickly, putting the device away. You know how women are, always planning something. But something about her expression didn't convince me. The way she'd smiled while reading the messages suggested the content was more meaningful than simple social coordination. After lunch, Leonard offered to show me improvements they'd made to the house. Walking through different rooms, I noticed new or renovated elements everywhere. Floors had been recently polished, walls showed fresh paint, and several pieces of furniture had been replaced or rearranged. In the master bedroom, I spotted something particularly noteworthy. On the dresser sat several shopping bags from expensive stores, some still unopened. The price tags I glimpsed showed amounts that seemed outrageous for a family supposedly struggling financially. "Has Sienna been shopping recently?" I asked, gesturing discreetly toward the bags. "Ah, that," Leonard replied with nervous laughter. "She found some incredible clearance sales this week. Sometimes it's better to buy things when they're marked down, even if you don't need them immediately." That logic seemed completely backward to me. A family truly facing financial difficulty wouldn't have the luxury of buying unnecessary items, regardless of how good the sales might be. As we returned to the living room, my phone chimed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Opening it, I discovered a message from the grocery store cashier. Somehow he'd obtained my contact information and sent me a photograph. The image showed a grocery receipt from just 2 days earlier. The total exceeded $400, and the itemized list included premium products, imported meats, fresh seafood, expensive wines, specialty cheeses, and numerous gourmet items. The name on the receipt clearly read Leonard Williams. Along with the photo came a message. "Mrs. Thorne, I apologize for contacting you, but I thought you should see this. This receipt is from 2 days ago. Your family deserves to know the truth." My heart began racing as I stared at the undeniable evidence. A $400 purchase of luxury goods made just 2 days before our visit by the same man who supposedly struggled to pay for basic necessities. I quickly put my phone away before anyone noticed my shocked expression, but my mind was already connecting all the pieces I'd been gathering throughout the day. Returning to where Owen and Sienna were still chatting, I saw my son looking relaxed and happy, enjoying what he believed was quality time with his in-laws. He had no idea he was witnessing an elaborate performance designed to maintain his financial support. "Are you feeling all right, Mom?" Owen asked, probably noticing my changed expression. "You look a bit pale." "Just a little tired," I lied. "I'm not used to such long outings anymore." Sienna immediately offered to prepare tea or find something to help me feel better. Her apparent concern would have been touching if I hadn't been starting to understand her true nature. For the next hour, I continued observing and listening, mentally cataloging evidence of every inconsistency, every inexplicable luxury, every convenient justification. The list grew constantly. Sienna's expensive clothes, Leonard's car, the well-appointed house, abundant food, premium wine, shopping bags, the receipt I'd received. But what hurt most was realizing this situation had probably continued for months, possibly years. How much money had my son sent to this family? How many sacrifices had he made? And how many had I made to help people who apparently didn't need assistance? When we finally said goodbye and left the house, my mind was completely decided. I couldn't allow this charade to continue. Owen deserved to know the truth, however painful it might be, and I had a responsibility to protect him from further manipulation. During the drive home, Owen commented on how pleasant the visit had been, and how well Sienna's family seemed to be doing. His words felt like daggers in my heart, knowing I would soon have to shatter his happy perception with a much darker reality. "Yes, they do seem to be doing very well," I replied carefully, choosing my words precisely. perhaps too well for a family experiencing such severe financial difficulties. The trip home was one of the most difficult journeys of my life. Every mile took me physically away from where I discovered the truth, but brought me emotionally closer to a decision that would change everything for our family. My mind churned with contradictory thoughts, doubts, and growing indignation that I struggled to control. Owen drove calmly, occasionally humming a tune that revealed his good mood. For him, we'd spent a pleasant afternoon with his in-laws, sharing delicious food and strengthening family bonds. He had no idea his mother had been collecting evidence of what appeared to be an elaborate, long-term deception. "Mom," he said while waiting at a traffic light, "I'm so glad to see you getting along well with Sienna's family. I know you had some reservations about our marriage initially, but now you can see what good people they are." His words broke my heart. My son was being manipulated by people who had transformed exploiting his generosity into an art form. How could I tell him that the people he trusted with his heart and his money were probably professional liars? "Owen," I began carefully, "have you ever noticed anything inconsistent in the stories Sienna tells you about their financial situation?" He glanced at me briefly before returning attention to traffic. "What do you mean, Mom? Inconsistent how?" "Well," I continued, selecting words very carefully, "today I noticed they have many new things in the house. The television, furniture, Sienna's clothes. All of that costs considerable money." Owen sighed, and I could see my comment had struck a nerve. "Mom, I already explained that Leonard has been picking up extra work. Besides, Sienna is very good at finding deals and bargains. Not everything that looks new is necessarily expensive. But don't you think it's strange that a family needing constant help with basic expenses can afford so many luxuries simultaneously?" I persisted, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-accusatory. "They're not luxuries, Mom," Owen replied with defensive undertones. "They're basic needs they've been able to meet through hard work and sacrifice. They bought the TV used, the furniture was a one-time opportunity, and Sienna's clothes are from clearance sales." Each justification my son repeated was identical to what I'd heard from Leonard and Sienna during lunch. It was as if they'd rehearsed these explanations perfectly, creating a consistent version of reality that could satisfy any uncomfortable questions. I decided to try a different approach. "Son, have you ever seen receipts or documentation confirming these incredible deals? Or have you accompanied Sienna when she finds these extraordinary bargains?" The question clearly made him uncomfortable. I could see his hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. "Mom, why all these questions? Sienna is my wife. If she tells me she got something on sale, I believe her. Marriage is built on trust." His answer confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Owen had never seen direct evidence of these supposed deals and extra jobs. He was blindly believing everything they told him because he trusted the people he loved. "Of course, son," I replied softly. "Trust is fundamental in marriage, but it's also important to protect yourself from people who might take advantage of that trust." "Are you suggesting that Sienna and her family are deceiving me?" Owen asked, now clearly annoyed. "Mom, that's a very serious accusation." "I'm not accusing anyone," I said quickly, realizing I'd pushed too hard. "I'm just expressing concerns I have as a mother who loves you and wants to see you happy and prosperous." The remainder of our trip passed in tense silence. Owen was clearly processing our conversation, but I could see from his expression that my words had created resistance rather than reflection. Any criticism of Sienna and her family would apparently be received as a personal attack. When we arrived at my apartment, Owen helped me from the car, but his goodbye hug was cooler than usual. "Mom," he said before leaving, "I hope you can give Sienna's family a fair chance. They're good people doing their best in difficult circumstances." "I'll keep that in mind, son," I replied, knowing he would interpret my response as a promise to be more understanding when actually I meant the opposite. That night, alone in my small apartment, I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of tea and tried to organize all the thoughts that had been bombarding my mind for hours. I had substantial circumstantial evidence, neighbor testimonies, personal observations, and even a photograph of the $400 grocery receipt. But I also had a son who was completely convinced his wife, and her family were victims deserving his help and compassion. Any direct attempt to challenge this belief had resulted in resistance and defensiveness. I took out my phone and examined the receipt photograph again. The numbers were indisputable. Over $400 in luxury goods purchased just 2 days before our visit. That amount represented more than I spent on food for an entire month. Looking at that evidence, I remembered all the times Owen had come home stressed after working extra shifts to send money to Sienna's family. I recalled occasions when I'd contributed my own meager savings, feeling sorry for their supposed desperate situation. The indignation I'd been suppressing all day finally began emerging with full force. It wasn't just the money that bothered me, though that was significant. It was the emotional manipulation, the systematic exploitation of my son's good nature, and the calculated way they'd built a web of lies to sustain their lifestyle at our family's expense. It also pained me to realize they had probably been laughing at us behind our backs. Every time we sent money, every time we worried about their well-being, every time we made sacrifices to help them, they likely saw it as evidence of our naivety and ease of manipulation. But what tormented me most was the question of what to do with this information. I had evidence, observations, documented inconsistencies. But I also had a son who would refuse to believe anything negative about his wife without absolutely irrefutable proof. If I acted too quickly or confrontationally, I risked alienating Owen and pushing him further toward Sienna. But if I didn't act soon, the manipulation would continue, possibly escalating, and my son would continue being exploited financially and emotionally. I decided I needed more evidence, proof so clear and indisputable that even Owen couldn't deny or rationalize it. I couldn't rely only on observations and suspicions. I needed concrete evidence that would reveal the true nature of the people who had deceived our family. That night, before falling asleep, I made a decision that would change everything that followed. I wouldn't directly confront Owen until I had absolutely solid evidence. Instead, I would begin my own discreet investigation, collecting proof that was impossible to deny or explain away with convenient stories about miraculous deals and mysterious extra jobs. The following days were among the most difficult I'd experienced in years. Every interaction with Owen became an exercise in self-control, trying to maintain normalcy while my mind constantly worked on addressing the situation I'd uncovered. The evidence I'd collected weighed on my conscience like a burden I couldn't share. During that week, I received 3 more messages from the grocery store cashier. Each contained additional information that confirmed and expanded my initial suspicions. He sent photographs of other receipts for purchases made by Leonard and Sienna in recent weeks, all showing excessive spending on unnecessary and expensive products. One photograph showed a receipt exceeding $600, including 2 bottles of French champagne costing over $100 each, imported seafood, and several gourmet cheeses. The date on the receipt was the same day Sienna had called Owen requesting urgent help with rent payment. I also received information from Hermione, one of the women I'd overheard talking at the grocery store. She'd obtained my phone number through a mutual friend and contacted me because she felt I needed to know more details about the situation. Hermione told me Sienna's family had been hosting regular parties at their house, events with professional catering and expensive decorations. She described a birthday celebration for Leonard that had cost, according to guest comments, several $1,000s in food, drinks, and entertainment. Adeline, she told me during a phone call, my daughter lives on their street and says delivery trucks with expensive purchases are constantly arriving. Clothes, appliances, furniture. It's not normal for a family supposedly in financial crisis. Each new piece of information made maintaining silence increasingly difficult. But I knew I needed the right moment and circumstances to present everything to Owen in a way that couldn't be easily dismissed or rationalized. The moment came on a Wednesday evening when Owen visited me after work. He looked especially tired and stressed. When I asked what was wrong, he told me Sienna had requested additional money for a medical emergency involving Leonard. He needs minor surgery, Owen explained, rubbing his temples with obvious tension. The insurance doesn't cover everything, and they need $500 by Friday. I've been working double shifts all week to gather the money. That was the final straw. $500 for a supposed medical emergency requested by the same family that had spent $600 on champagne and seafood just days earlier. I couldn't let my son sacrifice himself anymore for these elaborate lies. "Owen," I said, taking his hands in mine, "I need to show you something. But before I do, I want you to know I'm doing this because I love you and can't stand watching you being hurt." I took out my phone and showed him the first photograph of the $400 receipt. His eyes widened when he saw the date and total. But before he could speak, I showed him the other photographs I'd received during the week. "Mom, where did you get these?" Owen asked, examining the images with an expression mixing confusion and denial. "How do you know these receipts are real?" I explained my encounter with the grocery store cashier, conversations I'd overheard from neighbors, and all the observations I'd made during our visit. I spoke slowly and carefully, presenting each piece of evidence logically and chronologically. "But there has to be an explanation," Owen insisted, though his voice no longer sounded as convinced as before. "Maybe Leonard had a good month at work. Or maybe they received money from another source." "Son," I replied gently, "these luxury purchases were made on the same day Sienna called you requesting help with basic expenses. Doesn't that seem like too much of a coincidence?" I could see realization beginning to penetrate his mind. His eyes moved between the photographs on my phone and my face, searching for some way to reconcile what he was seeing with what he'd believed for so long. "Besides," I continued, showing him information about the expensive parties, "the neighbors have observed how this family really lives. It's not the story of desperate poverty they've been telling you." Owen stood up from his chair and began pacing my small living room. I could see his mind working, recalling past conversations, broken promises, and small inconsistencies he'd probably ignored or rationalized before. "But why would they do this?" he finally asked in a voice that sounded completely defeated. "Why would Sienna lie to me about something so important?" "Because it worked," I replied honestly. "Because you've been sending them money regularly without asking questions, trusting their word. For them, you're a reliable source of additional income they can use to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't otherwise afford." Tears began forming in my son's eyes. Seeing his pain broke my heart, but I knew it was necessary to free him from this destructive manipulation. "How much money have I given them in total?" he asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. We had reached the moment of complete truth. "According to what you've told me over the past few months, probably more than $8,000. And that's not counting the help I've provided myself." The number hit him like a physical blow. $8,000 represented months of extra work, personal sacrifices, and lost opportunities for his own future, all given to people who had been systematically deceiving him. "I need to talk to Sienna," he said finally with a determination I hadn't heard in his voice for a long time. "I need to confront her with this information and hear her explanation." "Are you sure you're ready for that conversation?" I asked him. "Once you put this information on the table, there will be no turning back. Your relationship will change forever, regardless of her answer." Owen was silent for several minutes, looking at the photographs on my phone repeatedly. I could see him processing not only the financial evidence, but also the emotional implications of being deceived by the person he loved. "Mom," he said finally, "thank you for showing me this. I know it must have been difficult for you to decide whether to tell me or not, but you were right. I needed to know the truth." I hugged him tightly, feeling both relief and worry about what would come next. The truth had finally emerged, but now came the most difficult part: facing the consequences of years of lies and manipulation. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I'm going home tonight and having a very serious conversation with my wife," Owen replied with a firmness he hadn't shown in months. "And depending on what she says, I'm going to make some important decisions about our future." Owen left my apartment that night with a determination I hadn't seen in him for months. I stayed awake very late, unable to sleep, wondering how the confrontation between my son and his wife would unfold. I knew the next few hours would be crucial for our family's future. At 2 o'clock in the morning my phone rang. It was Owen, and his voice sounded completely different when I answered. There was a mixture of pain, anger, and something that sounded like relief. "Mom," he said without preamble, "you were absolutely right about everything." "What happened, son?" I asked, though from his tone I could already imagine the confrontation hadn't gone well for Sienna. When I got home, I decided to check some things before talking to her. I went to our bedroom and looked through her belongings, something I'd never done before because I trusted her completely. What I found left me speechless. Owen told me he discovered several shopping bags hidden in the closet, all from expensive stores with receipts showing hundreds of dollars in expenses for clothes and accessories. He'd also found jewelry he'd never seen Sienna wear, still with original price tags attached. But that wasn't the worst part, Mom. In her purse, I found a notebook where she'd written down all the money she's requested from me over the past 2 years. Every lie, every emergency, every fabricated story is documented there, as if it were a business ledger. My heart sank hearing this. The situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Not only had they been lying about their financial situation, but they'd been keeping detailed records of their deception as if it were legitimate business. What else was in that notebook? I asked, though I feared the answer. "Plans to ask for more money," Owen replied bitterly. She had noted that the next story would be a dental emergency for her mother costing $2,000. She also had notes on how to make me feel guilty if I doubted her or asked too many questions. The cold calculation of it all sickened me. These weren't mistakes or misunderstandings. It had been systematic manipulation designed specifically to exploit my son's good nature. "When did you confront her with all this?" I asked. "At first, she tried denying everything," Owen continued. "She said the purchases were gifts from friends, that the notebook was just for tracking household expenses, that I was misinterpreting everything. But when I showed her the photographs you had of grocery store receipts, her strategy changed completely." "How did it change?" "She became furious. She screamed that I had no right going through her things, that my family had never really accepted her, and that this was all your fault for putting ideas in my head. She said you'd always been a meddling mother-in-law who wanted to destroy our marriage." Those accusations hurt, but they didn't surprise me. It was typical of professional manipulators to turn situations around and become victims when confronted with evidence of their lies. "But what impacted me most," Owen continued, "was when she finally admitted the truth. She told me her family had never been in financial crisis, that Leonard has a stable job paying well, and that everything had been a strategy to take advantage of my generosity. She used that phrase specifically, take advantage. She said I was easy to convince and that my family had money we could afford to share, as if we were responsible for maintaining their luxurious lifestyle." The conversation continued for over an hour. Owen told me every detail of the confrontation, every lie that had been revealed, every manipulation finally exposed. The picture that emerged was of a family that had turned deception into a way of life. "I also called Leonard during the argument," Owen told me. "I wanted to hear his version of events. Initially, he tried sticking to the original story, but when I told him I already knew the truth, he also admitted everything." "What did Leonard say?" "He said they decided from the beginning that I was a good match for Sienna because I had a stable job and a family that could help them financially. He told me it was never personal, just business, as if that made everything acceptable." The coldness of that admission left me speechless. Not only had they deceived my son, but they'd viewed him from the beginning as an income source, not as a human being with feelings and needs. "What did Sienna say when her father admitted everything?" I asked. "That was the most revealing part of the entire night," Owen replied with bitter laughter. "She got angry at him for ruining the plan. She wasn't upset because the lies had hurt our marriage, but because her father had confessed and destroyed her ability to continue deceiving me." For the next hour, Owen told me how he discovered more details about the extent of their lies. The supposed medical emergencies had never existed. Leonard's work problems were completely fabricated. Even the incredible deals explaining all their luxuries had a simpler explanation. They simply bought what they wanted with the money my son sent them regularly. "What hurts me most, Mom," he told me toward the end of our conversation, "isn't just the money I lost. It's realizing that for 2 years of marriage, I never really knew the woman I married. Everything was an act designed to keep me giving them money. What are you going to do now, son? I asked, though from his tone I already suspected his answer. I've already told Sienna tonight that our marriage is over. There's no way to rebuild trust after such systematic and calculated betrayal. Tomorrow, I'm starting divorce proceedings. Although I knew it was the right decision, my heart ached for my son. No one deserves to discover the person they love has been so elaborately deceiving them for so long. I also made it clear they won't receive another cent from our family, Owen continued. And I told her that if they try contacting you asking for help, you should tell them exactly what I think of their methods. Of course, son, I assured him. That family will never again receive help from us. Mom, Owen said before hanging up. Thank you for having the courage to show me the truth. I know it must have been difficult deciding whether to tell me, especially knowing it would probably destroy my marriage, but you saved me from years more of being used and manipulated. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, processing everything that had happened. The truth had finally emerged, but it had come at a very high cost for my son. His marriage had ended, his trust had been betrayed, and he would have to rebuild his life from scratch. But I also knew that in the long run, the truth had freed him from a situation that would only have worsened over time. Sienna and her family would never have stopped asking for money. They would never have voluntarily confessed their lies, and they probably would have escalated their manipulations until they'd completely drained my son's resources. The months following that revelatory night were a process of healing and rebuilding for our entire family. Owen temporarily moved into a small apartment near his job while processing the divorce and reorganizing his life. I accompanied him every step of the way, offering the emotional support he needed to overcome the betrayal he'd experienced. The divorce process revealed even more details about the magnitude of their deception. Owen's lawyers discovered Sienna had been hiding significant assets throughout their marriage. She had a secret bank account where she deposited some money received from my son, and had been purchasing valuable items she then hid to maintain the appearance of financial need. Mom, Owen told me during one of our weekly meals. The lawyer calculated that over our 2 years of marriage, I sent them more than $18,000. $18,000 I could have used to buy a house, invest in my future, or help you when you needed it. The number deeply impacted me. It represented years of my son's honest work, sacrifice for people who had seen him only as a source of easy income. But what made me most proud was seeing how Owen had matured through this painful experience. During the legal process, Sienna and her family tried contacting me several times. Leonard called attempting to convince me to intercede with Owen, promising they would return all the money and never ask for help again. His pleas sounded desperate, but I'd already learned to recognize their manipulations. Leonard, I told him during the last call I accepted, you had 2 years to be honest with my son. You chose lies, manipulation, and deceit. Now you have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Sienna also attempted a final manipulation effort by appearing at my apartment one afternoon unannounced. She was dressed simply with no makeup, trying to project vulnerability and repentance. But I already knew her techniques too well. Adeline, she said with tears that seemed rehearsed, I know we made mistakes, but I truly loved Owen. This all got out of control, but we never wanted to hurt him. Sienna, I replied with surprising calm. Real love doesn't include systematic lies and calculated manipulation. What you did wasn't love. It was exploitation disguised as love. She continued trying various approaches. First the repentant victim, then the desperate wife, then the daughter-in-law who just wanted to repair family relationships. But every strategy only confirmed what I already knew about her true nature. The money you took from my son isn't just money, I explained to her. It represented his trust, his future, and his ability to believe in people he loves. That can't be returned with apologies or promises. Finally, after more than an hour of failed manipulation attempts, Sienna showed her true colors. Her expression changed completely and she told me coldly, I always knew you were the problem in this marriage. Owen would have been happy if you hadn't interfered. Perhaps, I replied calmly, But he would have been happy while being deceived and exploited. I prefer him to be temporarily unhappy but free than happy but used. After that confrontation, I never heard from Sienna or her family again. According to Hermione, they moved from the neighborhood a few weeks later, probably to avoid embarrassment from everyone knowing the truth about their methods. Owen's recovery process was gradual but steady. Initially, he was angry with himself for being so trusting. But with time and perspective, he began understanding that his generosity and trust weren't weaknesses, but valuable qualities that had been exploited by unscrupulous people. "Mom," he told me during a dinner near his new apartment, "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I learned something important. Generosity must be accompanied by wisdom, and trust must be earned and maintained, not given blindly." With the money he no longer had to send to Sienna's family, Owen was able to start rebuilding his finances. He opened a savings account, began investing in his professional future, and for the first time in years, could enjoy small luxuries without feeling guilty. He also helped improve my own situation. He insisted on giving me money to buy new appliances I needed and began visiting more frequently, bringing quality food we could share without worrying about cost. "It's ironic," he reflected one day as we shared a meal he'd brought. "All this time I was worried about helping a family that didn't need help, while you, who really could have used more support, never asked for anything." That observation deeply moved me. During the years of Sienna's manipulation, I'd watched my son exhaust himself trying to meet constant demands for money, while I remained silent about my own needs to avoid adding pressure to his life. 6 months after the divorce, Owen had found new balance in his life. He'd learned to be more cautious without becoming cynical, wiser without losing his ability to trust people who truly deserved his trust. "Mom," he told me during one of our Sunday walks in the park, "I want to thank you again for having the courage to show me the truth. I know it was difficult deciding whether to intervene." "Son," I replied, "a mother must always protect her children even when it hurts. My job isn't just to love you, but also to ensure the people you love truly deserve you." The grocery store cashier, a man named Eli, also became an unexpected but welcome presence in our lives. One day he visited to ask how things had turned out, and we ended up talking for hours about the importance of speaking up when we see injustices, even when it's uncomfortable. "You know, Mrs. Thorne," Eli told me before leaving, "my mother went through a similar situation years ago, and no one had the courage to tell her the truth. When everything was finally discovered, she'd already lost her life savings. That's why I decided to talk to you. Some truths hurt, but silence hurts more." Now, when I look back on everything that happened, I feel a mixture of pain for what my son had to suffer, but also deep pride for the strength he showed in facing the truth and making right decisions. I learned that true family love sometimes requires the courage to speak difficult truths, confront uncomfortable situations, and protect the people we love, even when it means destroying illusions they prefer to keep. That day when I heard those strange words at the grocery store and decided to observe instead of ignore, I changed the course of our lives forever. It was one of the most difficult decisions I'd ever made, but also one of the most correct. Today, Owen is a wiser, stronger man who's more aware of his own worth. He's no longer the victim of professional manipulators, but someone who's learned to set healthy boundaries and value his own generosity enough not to allow its exploitation. And I, Adeline Thorne, at 69 years old, learned it's never too late to be brave, to stand up for what's right, and to protect those we love. Because in the end, the most powerful justice isn't the one that shouts, but the one that acts with wisdom and protects those we love most. 2 years have passed since that afternoon at the grocery store that changed our lives forever. As I write these words, sitting in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea that's already growing cold, I can't help but reflect on all the ground we've covered since then. Owen remarried 6 months ago. His new wife, Rebecca, is a hardworking and honest woman he met at his office. What I like most about her isn't just her transparency in everything she does, but the way she respects the relationship I have with my son. She's never tried to interfere between us or shown the slightest interest in our family finances. The first time Rebecca came to my house for dinner, she brought ingredients for us to cook together. Adeline, she told me as we prepared vegetables, I want you to know I'll never ask you or Owen for money. I believe in working for what I need and being honest about what I can afford. Her words moved me to tears, not only for her honesty, but because I realized how traumatized I'd been by the experience with Sienna. For months after the divorce, every time we met someone new, I found myself analyzing their motivations and looking for signs of manipulation. The healing process wasn't easy for either of us. Owen went through periods of depression where he questioned his judgment in relationships. There were nights when he'd call me asking if he could ever fully trust anyone again. "Mom," he'd tell me during those late-night calls, "how can I be sure I won't be deceived again? How can I distinguish between someone who truly loves me and someone who only sees opportunity?" Those conversations broke my heart because I saw how Sienna's betrayal had damaged not only his finances, but his fundamental ability to trust people. But I was also proud to see how he was slowly rebuilding his confidence in a more mature and wise way. During the first year after the divorce, Owen developed what he called his verification system. Before helping anyone financially, he would ask to see documentation, talk to multiple sources, and take time to evaluate the consistency of stories told to him. Initially, I thought he might have become too distrustful, but over time, I realized he'd simply learned to balance his generous nature with practical wisdom he hadn't possessed before. He no longer gave money from emotional impulse, but after careful and rational evaluation. This new approach served him well when a coworker asked for help with a supposed family emergency. Instead of sending money immediately, Owen asked to see medical documents and spoke directly to the mentioned hospital. It turned out the story was false and his coworker was trying to get money for gambling. "Mom," he told me after discovering that lie, "2 years ago, I would have sent money without asking a single question. Now I understand that verifying isn't distrusting. It's protecting yourself from people who seek to take advantage of others' kindness." For my part, I also had to process my own feelings about what had happened. For months, I felt guilty for having waited so long to say something, wondering how much money we could have saved if I'd acted sooner. But with time and perspective, I came to understand that I'd acted at the right time, when I had enough evidence to be convincing. The grocery store cashier who initially alerted me to the situation became a dear friend to our family. He and his wife Marlene visit us regularly, and we've developed a friendship based on shared values of honesty and mutual support. "You know, Adeline," Eli told me during one of his visits, "what I admire most about this whole situation is how you handled the truth. Many people would have made a scene, yelled, or sought revenge, but you simply presented facts and let truth do its job." His words made me reflect on something important I'd learned throughout this process: that silent dignity is more powerful than noisy revenge. I never sought to hurt Sienna or her family. I simply stopped allowing them to hurt us. Hermione, the neighbor who had provided additional information about Sienna's family, also became a close friend. She helped me understand that what we'd experienced wasn't unusual, that many families suffer this kind of manipulation, especially when children are generous and trusting. "My son-in-law works in social services," Hermione told me during one of our conversations, "and he says these kinds of family scams are more common than people think. There are people who've turned manipulation of kind-hearted relatives into a way of life." This perspective helped me understand that we hadn't been particularly naive or foolish. We'd simply been targets of people who were experts at exploiting emotions and family ties. The financial impact of the deception was significant but manageable. Owen calculated that in total we'd lost around $18,000 when my contribution and some loans he'd made that were never returned were included. However, once the flow of money to that family stopped, our financial situation improved dramatically. With the money he no longer had to send monthly, Owen was able to save for a down payment on a small house. He asked me to live with him and Rebecca, but I prefer maintaining my independence in my own apartment, though now with better furniture and appliances he insisted on buying for me. "Mom," he told me when he brought the new refrigerator, "for years I watched you count coins while I sent hundreds of dollars to people who didn't need them. Now it's your turn to have the things you deserve." Rebecca turned out to be not only a good wife to Owen but also a considerate daughter-in-law to me. She never tries to compete with my place in my son's life, and always includes me in her family plans and decisions. The difference from Sienna's attitude is so marked that sometimes I find it hard to believe both women exist in the same world. Last month, Rebecca confided they're expecting their first child. The news filled me with pure joy I hadn't felt in years. This grandson or granddaughter will grow up in a home where honesty and integrity are fundamental values, very different from the environment of lies and manipulation that would have existed if Owen had remained with Sienna. I want our child to know you as the grandmother who had the courage to protect our family, Rebecca told me while holding my hand. Owen has told me the whole story, and I deeply admire what you did. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never decided to hide behind those trash dumpsters to observe Leonard. How long would the deception have continued? Would Owen have eventually discovered the truth on his own, or would he have continued being exploited indefinitely? I'll probably never know the answers to those questions, but what I do know is that the courage to face uncomfortable truths is one of the most important responsibilities we have toward the people we love. In these 2 years, I've reflected extensively on the signs I ignored for so long. The small details that didn't add up, the overly convenient explanations, the way Sienna always had a perfect story for every situation. Now I understand that my maternal instinct had been trying to alert me for months, but I'd silenced those doubts because I didn't want to create conflict. I've learned that maintaining family peace shouldn't come at the cost of allowing family exploitation. Sometimes the greatest act of love is creating necessary conflict to protect the people who matter most. Today, at 69 years old, I feel wiser and stronger than I have in decades. Not only because I helped save my son from a destructive situation, but because I proved it's never too late to be brave, to stand up for what's right, and to protect those we love. The experience taught me that true strength isn't in avoiding problems, but in facing them with dignity when necessary, and that sometimes the most difficult decisions are also the most correct ones, even if their full impact can only be appreciated with time's passage. As I finish writing these reflections, I can hear Owen and Rebecca laughing in the kitchen, preparing the Sunday dinner we'll share in a few minutes. It's the sound of a genuine family built on solid foundations of honesty and mutual respect. That sound is worth more than all the dollars we lost during the years of deception. Because in the end, the most valuable thing we have isn't the money we can give, but the authentic relationships we can build and protect. And no one can ever take that away from us. If this story resonated with you or if you face similar challenges in your own family, I'd be grateful if you'd consider following our channel. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that remind us that truth, though painful, is always worth pursuing.